Thank you, President Marcia. It reminds me never to be on your bad side. It's tough. In my introduction, I could easily talk about the extended Wolf family, many who were introduced earlier, including Bill and Corny and of course Francis, who could not be here today, and how much the collective Wolf clan has meant to the York community and to our Rotary Club itself. And I, just as an aside, I do want you to know there's many, many, many of the Wolf clan among us. You may not know it, so be careful in your comments. I could also discuss the borough of Mount Wolf and how it received its name way back in 1852 with Adam Wolf, a multi-great-grandfather to our speaker. I could talk about the Wolf organization and its 6 generations of family members who have successfully run the company. Most generations required to buy out the previous generation and its recent sale. I could go on and on about the boards and the community organizations our speaker has chaired or been part of, but where would I even start? Better York, the Chamber, the United Way, the York County Community Foundation, York College. The list is just really way too long. Perhaps I could mention that in 2014 spring primary and a political neophyte breaking through the political apparatus, driving a Jeep and becoming the Democratic nominee. All that from the central part of the state of all places. And then the victory in November, winning 55% of the statewide vote. But the voters also gave the Republican legislature larger majorities in both the House and the Senate, which has set up the current debate of who really has electoral mandate to lead this state. But everyone who knows me knows how much I shy away from talking about politics. I considered many, many, many different types of introductions for our speaker, but in the end, there really is no need other than to introduce our friend, our fellow York Countian, the Governor, Commonwealth.
That's really nice, Mike. I really appreciate that. And Marcia, thank you for making me an honorary member. You mentioned I don't have to pay the quarterly dues, but I was actually a full member of the Rotary Club, but I couldn't make all the lunches, so I don't have to do that either. Right? I like this. Why did it take you so long? I just want to point out, lest you think the family is breaking up. My father had a small heart attack this morning, so he and my wife and my mother are in the hospital with Dad. But he's fine, and he's sorry he couldn't be here, and sorry he couldn't be with the rest of the family. But this is, Rotary has been such a big part of his life, and he was quite honored to be photographed. He wasn't honored to be photographed necessarily with me, but to be photographed and have his picture 2 times in the Daily Record insert this weekend. So he's sorry he's not here, and I'm sorry he's not here because there could be at least one more friendly face in the audience. I gotta say, this is the friendliest crowd I've ever seen. Scott, even though you're it is, I'm just kidding. It is really good to be home again. I mean, I have been here many times before. I'm trying to count. I didn't know how many times I was a Paul Harris Fellow, but I don't remember how many times I've been here to speak. But you have been so nice. Either that or you have such a limited supply of speakers that a lot to talk about the Wolf organization, about the United Way, about the Martin Library campaigns that I chaired, to talk about education, to talk about a lot of different things. I was here when I was Secretary of Revenue. I was here when I was a candidate, as you pointed out, Marcia, last year for when I was running for governor. And in most of those presentations, it has been a nice thing to have my parents here. So I am really sorry that they're not here. But just to reinforce what President Marcia said, my father, I think, is still the longest living member of Rotary. He joined in 1948, which not so coincidentally was the year I was born. He was trying to figure out how to get out of the house. But they're sorry they're not here. As I said this last year at this time, I was looking forward to going to Harrisburg in the hopes that I would win, and if I were successful, what I would do mostly was take all the things I've learned in my life to Harrisburg. And I have taken those lessons to Harrisburg, lessons I learned in my education. 10 years through Northeastern, 2 years at a prep school, the Hill School in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, 3 years at Dartmouth College, 2 years at London University, I did my PhD at MIT, that's right. I went as long as I could go before they told me there are no more degrees. But I've taken the lessons I learned in building a business. And as I guess Mike said, my family did not believe in the concept of inheritance. Why was that, Uncle John? They had to buy the business, so darn it, we had to buy the business too. And it was a really interesting experience to do the leverage buyout and build a business. And actually did it here in New York, and then came back and did it the second time. So I've taken those lessons. But I've also taken lessons learned from experiences with nonprofit organizations, and Mike was kind enough to point out a number of them, but I've actually been chair of a lot of organizations here in York, from the United Way. I was chair of 2 Martin Library capital campaigns, the Chamber of Commerce, Better York. I was chair, I think back then, Jane was still called the president of the York County Community Foundation. I was chair of the board of trustees of York Countian, Pennsylvania. I was also a lay leader and chair of the administrative board of Otterbein United Methodist Church in metropolitan Mount Wolf, and many more. But most of all, I think what I've taken to Harrisburg, all those experience and all those backgrounds, what I've taken to Harrisburg is what I learned growing up here, and all those different things. But growing up here, and that is the need to work hard, the need to be honest, the need to be a person of your word, and the need to hold yourself accountable. Those are York County values, and I took those values with me to Harrisburg. And what I love most about being part of the community was the sense of purpose and activity. I mean, we don't give ourselves enough credit here, but having seen a lot of the rest of the world, we're doers. We're doers here in New York. We're not passive observers in our community. We don't like others to make choices for us. When we have choices to make, by God, we're going to make them for ourselves. And that's the way I am. That's the way I was when I was in business. It's why I wanted to be part of running a business. It's why I was so active in my community. It wasn't just that I was nosy. I actually wanted to be in part in leading things that made this community better. It's why I ran for governor, and it's really why I'm back here today. Because we have a choice to make. And I think we ought to understand that we have this choice. We do, in fact, live in a democracy. And in a democracy, you all, I all, Scott and Kevin, Doug, we all work for you. You are our bosses, and that's the way it's supposed to work. And occasionally, for the most part, we can represent you and try to make decisions for you that you would make, we hope. But from time to time, we all have to weigh in and make some decisions that are really important. I think we're at that point right now. We're at a fork in the road. And we're not like Yogi Berra who said when you get to a fork in the road, take it. Well, unfortunately, we can't do that. We have to actually choose which path we're going to take. And I want to make sure that we're all aware of the options that we have, what one path does and what the other path does. Obviously, I have my preference here. But when you decide what choice you want to make here, I want to make sure that's an informed choice. And so I think one of the things we can do to make our democracy work best is to make sure that when we go out, disagree though we may, and make sure that we at least do the job we're supposed to do in having you understand the choices you have to make. Here's the big decision that we have to make, as I see it. We can keep doing things the way we've been doing things. That's, of course, not why I ran for governor. Or we can do things differently than the way we've been doing things. We can continue toward the bad future that I think what we've been doing entails. And yes, I am selling here. Or we can do the right thing and put the Commonwealth on what I think is a sustainable and constructive path to the future. And I think there are 3 real questions we have to answer for ourselves. The first is about education. Do we want to invest in education, or do we want to not invest in it? We have to do this, and we must do it in a responsible and reasonable way. We've got to fund it with a reasonable and I think responsible severance tax. This is stuff we take out of the ground, it's ours, and we ought to do what every other state in the union has done and actually put a tax on it. That's the first thing. education do we want to invest in? Second, do we want to continue to rely on the property tax so heavily for funding those schools? Or do we want to do what most other states have done by reducing the burden on local property owners and absorbing more of that burden at the state level on broad-based taxes? And finally, do we want to manage our state's finances in such a way that leads objective outsiders, not just me, outsiders downgrading our credit rating? That's what we are doing right now. Do we want to continue that? So let me start with the first of these things, investing in our schools. Good schools are the key to our future. They're the key to our economic future. They're the key to healthy communities. They're the key to the future of our democracy. Now, I understand, having grown up here in York County, I don't need you to tell me we cannot throw money at any problem and hope to get to a good place. I understand that. But we also have to be honest that we cannot keep taking money out of the problem and hope to get to a good place. It just won't happen. It sounds good, it feels good, but it won't happen. So we have to have investment in education, wise investments. We have to have accountability, but we have to make sure that we invest. We cannot lull ourselves into thinking that there is any justification for a broad retreat from investing in education. Now, I would love to, in many ways, go back to the 19th century. Such a neat time to live, just from the sound of it. When I was in the Peace Corps in a remote village in India, I think I got a little bit of a sense, pulled my water out of the well, what it was like to live in the 19th century, and I saw the sort of one-room, their version of the one-room school down the road. And there are a lot of ways it was pretty nice. It was a very simple life. But we're in the 21st century. And what I saw in India, in that small village, and what I suspect we would have seen in the 19th century, it's really not relevant. It's not going to work for us today. It was cheap. Although, I think it would be really hard to get someone to come to school early to stoke the fire and put lime in the outhouse. What do you think? So, the truth is we're in the 21st century. I mean, think about it. To be a plumber today, to be a plumber, you actually have to know some physics, or an electrician. To be a good farmer today, you have to actually know chemistry and some economics. If you want to be a plant worker, actually, if you wanted to work in one of my old warehouses, we're an SAP company. We were, the company I sold. It was an SAP company. And people taking material out of trucks coming to those warehouses touched the general ledger. They had to know some advanced mathematics. If you're working in a manufacturing facility with computer numerical control machines, you have to know statistical process control. You got to know mathematics. We're not in the 19th century anymore. We need an education system that recognizes that. We have to do that, and we have to make sure that our schools keep up with that. A severance tax would actually make it easier to finance these schools and the kind of education that we need. It has to be reasonable. We need the gas industry to succeed in Pennsylvania, because I think that could be a big part of our economic future. But we're the only major gas producing state in the country without a severance tax. Now, you know, of course, you all pay the severance tax right now. You know that. When you fill up with gasoline, you're paying the severance tax for one of those Bolshevik states, Texas, Alaska, Louisiana, Wyoming. Well, not so much Wyoming. Charge severance taxes on their petroleum products. When that North Slope oil is taken out of the ground up in Alaska, it comes down to the tanker and it's taken to a refinery somewhere and it's turned into gasoline. And if it gets to Pennsylvania and you buy it, embedded in the price you pay is the tax that Alaska levies on that North Slope oil. That's just the way it works. So I'm sure all of you in this room have received thank you notes from the people of Texas. Thank you for paying attention, right? You all got that? No, I didn't either. And I didn't get anyone from Louisiana. I haven't gotten a thank you note from Wyoming or Oklahoma. But we're paying their taxes. Now, who's paying the severance tax for Pennsylvania? No one, because we don't have one. We do have an impact fee that raises about $200 million. But let me compare that and contrast that. Last week or 2 weeks ago, the oil and gas companies in Texas sent a letter to the public release crowing about the fact that they had just contributed $15 billion to the economy, the government of Texas, in taxes to support the government. $15 billion. Last year we had about, what, it's got $200 million from the impact fee. We don't get much. Is that right, Kevin? I'm going to be bipartisan asking the question. But I think we have to understand that we're the only state, major gas producing state, without a severance tax, and we're certainly in play for suckers. We ought to have one. We need accountability. Once we resolve to fund our schools, we have to resolve to make sure that the money that we're sending to these schools actually does what we want them to do. In my budget proposal, I have some accountability measures. I want to make sure the money that we're investing goes to the classroom, goes to education, not to something else. And so I've asked to have every school district get back to me with how they plan to spend the money if the House of Representatives and the Senate agrees to this kind of investment. But I'm open to other ways to make sure that we have accountability. And I think we ought to do that to make sure we're investing wisely. I don't want people to be suspicious of how the money is being invested. I think we need to make sure it's going to the right purposes. But we can't fool ourselves into thinking we don't need it. The point is, we need to make sure our educators have the resources they need to prepare our fellow citizens for the world that they will actually confront here in the 21st century. And we need to understand that we are as concerned about the education of kids who aren't in our school district, if they're in Philadelphia or Allegheny County or Elk County or Perry County, as we are with the kids when my daughters went to the Northeastern School District. We have to make sure that every kid in Pennsylvania gets that education because that's going to save us a lot of money down the way. Less prison costs, fewer welfare costs, fewer unemployment compensation costs, and a much more robust economy. So that's the first thing. Second thing we need to make sure is that we fund our schools fairly. There's a lot of talk about property tax reform, and I think it's really important. One of the things we've done with the way we fund public education, Pennsylvania is one of the lowest states in the country in terms of state support for public education. 47th. We're one of the lowest. Now, what do those other 46 ahead of us know that we don't? Well, they know that a broader-based tax actually is a better way, a more efficient way to fund public education. But the other thing they know is that if you leave the local taxpayers the biggest responsibility for paying for our schools, you're going to set up some real problems for yourself. One of them is that antagonism that makes people who would be predisposed to say, I really like public education, but if the choice you're giving me is that I'm going to have to get out of my house if I continue to support education, then guess what? I'm all of a sudden against education. And that's what we've got with our property tax system. We have been forcing homeowners, it's not just senior citizens, but working families out of their homes because they can no longer afford to keep up with this liquid tax on an illiquid asset. And the thing we can do about that is to make sure that the state is shouldering its fair share of the burden for supporting public education. We could do that and reduce the disparities that exist between school districts if we did that. Again, we all know of people whose property tax bills are so great that they're in jeopardy of losing their homes. It's a perverse system we have here. The Economist a few months ago, I think, had an article about how we fund public education. And the reliance on the property tax, the arithmetic of it, means that the poorer the area, this is the way the property tax works, the lower the tax base, the less money we're going to have for whatever you're using that money to support. Got that? The poorer you are, the less money you're going to have. So you go to a school system that has the challenges that poverty impacted schools have, we're going to give you less money. But here's the kicker. Here's what's really interesting about our system. We're going to charge you more for it too. Your tax rate is going to be higher than the surrounding areas for less money. So we're going to give you inadequate funds. We're going to charge you too much for it, and you're going to have a lousy school system as a result. Not a good system. The Economist said we're the only country in the developed world that actually looks at education funding that way. So we can and we must do better. In my budget, I proposed a $3.8 billion reduction in property taxes. It's $3.8 billion reduction in property taxes. Now, as my opponents are fast to point out, if you're moving from local taxes and you're shifting to a broad-based state tax, guess what that means? Well, that's a $3.8 billion increase in state taxes. Conveniently forgetting that the $3.8 billion reduction in property taxes means a $3.8 billion increase in state taxes, but that's the deal. And I think we need to do it because if we don't, we're going to continue to have more and more unfair pressure on local property owners, and that's going to lead to worse and worse, poorer and poorer outcomes for our schools. Finally, and by the way, one of the places that would be, I don't know too many people here who are not interested in doing good things for the city of York. Think of what the city of York would do if it actually had a tax system. I think, 60% of the tax bill for the city of York taxpayer is the school?
About 65.
65, okay, go figure. 65%, I didn't know. Scott, did you know? I was going to ask you that question too. 65%. If we actually had the city school tax on a level playing field with York County, that would go a long way to making the playing field level for businesses and homeowners who wanted to locate in the city of York. Finally, this is my final point, we have to be, thank you for no applause on that. I'm getting to the end. My final point is that we have to be honest with ourselves in the way we do our finances. And this starts with a budget that actually adds up. If I took the budget, is Joe Crosswhite here? Steve, you're from M&T Bank. That was my banker when I was at the Wolf Organization, right? If I took anything that looked like the budget I was presented with on June 30th to M&T Bank, they would have thrown me out of the office. It doesn't work. They would have said, you don't have a plan. They would have said, you don't have a budget that actually works here. The math doesn't add up. It's full of one-time fixes. It has smoke and mirrors in it. Sleight of hand and wishful thinking. In business, you do that sometimes, but you don't get away with it. Here we get away with it. So that's not right. Now, you could be forgiven for looking at me and say, okay, you're selling here. You have a dog in this hunt. You don't want to let the other side talk about the objective reality here. You're making this up. Well, okay, fair enough. Don't take my word for it. Why is it we've had credit downgrades? Outside objective Fitch, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, they've looked at Pennsylvania and said the same thing my banker would have said to me if I had taken this budget to my bank. It doesn't work. And so they downgraded us 5 times in the last 4 years. 5 times. 3 times last year alone. 3 times. So, again, you could look at me and say, okay, that's esoteric financial baloney. Well, what does that actually mean? Well, here's what it means. I asked my budget secretary for Pennsylvania, what premium we're paying on our debt. Okay? What do we pay over a AAA rated state if we actually had our finances in order? What do we pay? And the answer is 83 basis points on new debt. If we do a new debt issue, the thinking is it might be over 100 basis points. But let's stick with the 83 basis points. That's where we are right now. The last bond we issued was on unemployment compensation. 83 points. That's not what we're paying in interest. That's what we're paying extra. 83 basis points. So what does that mean? Well, right now we have about $17 billion borrowed directly. I'm not counting any of the other funds that borrow with the good faith and credit of Pennsylvania behind it, but directly, $17 billion. So what does that 83 basis point premium actually mean? Well, it's about $139 million a year if we keep going down the path we're going. Now, again, I want to be honest here and fair. Some of the debt we have is old debt with lower interest rates when we actually did have a good credit rating. But as that debt comes off, we're going to be paying the new debt. The new price, I'm saying conservatively, is 83 basis point premium. That's $139 million a year. And that's because the people who lend us money don't like our financial condition. That's because the bank we go to are saying, you know, no, the budget doesn't add up, you're going to pay more. You're just like an ordinary citizen. You go take a home equity loan or a consumer loan and your FICO score isn't good, you pay a higher interest rate. Well, same goes for the state of Pennsylvania. The Commonwealth is paying a premium. That's $139 million we're paying more than we would if we actually had our finances in balance. That should appeal to you as York Countians. That's $139 million that's not going to education. That's $139 million that's not going to a road or a bridge. It's $139 million that's not going to economic development activities that allows us to compete against New Jersey and New York and Maryland when they try to snake businesses away from us. That's $139 million we don't have for tax relief. That's $139 million we're paying to bondholders because we don't want to manage our finances responsibly. And that's not right. That's not what I learned here in York County. I don't think it's what you want someone from York County to represent you as wanting in Harrisburg. It's not what I did in my business. It's not what I do with my family finances. It's not what we did running community organizations in York. So we have an important choice before us. And I think we need, in this democracy, to make that choice. Forget partisanship, forget party labels, think about what we actually have to do here. Do we want a society that recognizes that we have to have good schools? We've got to make sure that we're working with our educators to make sure that we do the right thing from a pedagogical point of view. But if anybody is under the illusion that one of the things we're going to have to do is actually put in some money, you're whistling Dixie. We really have to do that. Second thing, we really need property tax relief. We cannot keep going on the way we're going and hope to get to a good place if we do not give relief to property owners who are really, really at wit's end. And finally, we really have to figure out how we're going to make our budget balance. We have got to do that. That's the truth. That's the choice we have to make. I'm laying out the York, I think, it's a York County option. Practical, it's not ideological, it's saying, frankly, folks, we can delude ourselves into thinking we don't have to pay for education. We actually do. Can we find ways to do things more efficiently in education? Absolutely. I'm for that. And I don't think there's an educator here who would be for that. But we're not in the 19th century anymore. We're not even in the 1950s anymore. I couldn't keep up with my daughters. But they were coming home from school by the time they were in high school. And hell, I have a PhD from MIT. Maybe Jim Anderson could have. But I couldn't. So we really have to keep up with that. We have to have property tax relief. We aren't on a sustainable course with property taxes that are going through the roof. And we have to have a balanced budget. We have to have a budget that actually works. So please, let's choose to invest intelligently and honestly in the future. Forget partisanship. That's what I think we ought to do, and given the practical nature of the folks I grew up with here and worked with throughout my career, I think that's what you want to do too. So thank you for having me back. It's been great to be back. I really appreciate it. Thank you.